The largest population of Afro-Latinos in the U.S. reside in the Northeast region of the United States. Could their perspectives or ideas be a little different than mine? I live in the rural South of the United States, and I invite you to join me as we learn about culture, people, the differences in culture, because, culture is everywhere. Take this podcast as cultural lessons about the world and the interesting people in it. So, welcome. My name is Jennifer White, and I'm an Afro-Latina teacher in the rural South. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this episode 20 in Afro-Latina teacher in the rural South. In episode 17, I interviewed the administrator of the Facebook group AFROMEXICO. His name is George, and this is the second part of that interview. George, or others call him Jorge, is an interesting individual because he grew up in the border of Mexico and the United States. Being a bilingual individual, he could have done what those in his surroundings normally did, such as go to work for a company and use his bilingual skills for the rest of his life. Instead, George decided to go to college, where an education as an undergraduate allowed him to realize there was so much that he had to change in him as far as identity. I can totally understand where this is coming from, knowing the realization of who you are, where you come from. In this episode, we finalize our talk as he dives into more facts about AFROMEXICO, indigenous roots, and how purity was embedded into us, but it doesn't really exist. Here's my conversation with Jorge. Oh my gosh. Now tell me, you talked about your parents. What do your parents look like and what is their origin? They all from Michoacan?
My mom is from Sonora, so she's from the northern region. And it's very white European for the most part. And so there is a very absent Black presence there. There is like pockets in Sonora. Yeah, there's for sure there's Black presence everywhere in Mexico. Small pockets, bigger pockets, but in Sonora, I think it's now more in the past, right? There isn't such a thing as a Black community in Sonora. and they're the indigenous communities are the Yaqui communities that also border with Arizona, right? So the Yaqui indigenous groups have been there for hundreds of years. They're one of the Euro-Aztec, languages. So it's like post-Aztec. So anyhow, my mom's from there, but there was a lot of German presence. So Porfirio Diaz was like a dictator, in Mexico, and he was all about purification of the race. Just like the rest of Latin America, everybody had their president.
Everybody has to do this.
And he sponsored one-way tickets to all these Europeans from Germany to come live in northern Mexico to protect northern frontiers and essentially do manifest destiny of what we saw here in the United States. Mm-hmm. Displacement of indigenous groups by force and by force. So they would bring Europeans to settle in these lands that belong to indigenous people to take over them and then displace them. And then with the hope that those mestizos that were there and who wanted to stay, they would mix with the white population or the mestizos at the time to create better race, essentially, right? So that's where my mom is from. So she's pretty white, light skin. But my grandmother is brown, looks very indigenous. So does my grandpa, right? So anyhow, I seen like all the shades of Mexicanos. They're in my family.
In your family.
And then my dad is like literally Black, indigenous, and then Spanish. Wow. So anything in between that, and then the Spanish, and then Purépecha is the culture of and Michoacán. And then for my grandpa, who passed away years ago, he was light skinned, right? So sometimes like your grandpa doesn't necessarily look Black, just like maybe their kids. But if you look at his dad, he might be Black, So it's like sometimes these race genetics like jump, right? Yes. Generation. So I mean, mixing in Mexico has been happening for centuries, Even before, there was no such thing as a pure indigenous group either way. So even when I say Purépecha, like Purépecha are a mix of various different indigenous groups. when they say Aztec, they're like a mix of 3 different, specifically indigenous groups. So anyhow, there's a lot of that, and I think I appreciate Native American studies because they're the ones that really taught me that framework that we can't box things in. Yeah. This idea of purity is a Eurocentric colonizing way of thinking, and we got to remove ourselves from that. So unsubscribe from that,
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Your family sounds like my family. It sounds like any normal Latin American family. Hey, that's why I have that Encanto poster right there.
Yeah.
I mean, really, all the movies with Latin America should have had the same representation because all our families look like that. Redhead and light skin and black and
all the shades,
curly hair. It's like we have all of it. It's like, okay, thank you Disney. It's about time we got something that we can call our own, because all the other cartoons have been really just bleached like crazy. But okay, so I found you because I was following a group called Afro-Mexicanos, which honestly, when I started my quest of finding my identity as a black person, because I found out I was black like 7-8 years ago. That was weird, but anyway, so
that's real.
When I found, you're old, you're not a kid, and that's why for me it's important for us to talk about this now to students that are younger than us, because that way they could figure it out earlier. But I went ahead and signed up to follow every group that said Afro in it. That's really the truth. And when I found yours, I was like, Mexico is dear to my heart. I don't know why, but I just love the country and how rich it is, and how the history of the native Mexicanos who were in this country, who because of them we have the education system, the Mendez versus the education, all of that stuff, all that movement. Mexicanos strong. They're the ones who started. They're the first. They're the first Mexicano, the first Latinos who were here making a mark in the world. And then it's like we over here in Alabama, we have no clue about these things. We don't know. That's why I bring that up in my classroom about these heroes, that they're the ones that were also in the civil rights movement. But your group is humongous. You have a huge following, and I want to know, tell me more about this group. How did you start it, and how does it flow with what you're doing?
Wow. Well, it started back when I was doing research back in 2006 or 8, I believe. I mean, one of the first groups out there on Afro something.
Wow.
And it was really a way for me to post links, right? I was doing research and I would come across this hidden article that you needed to really dig to find it, or one blog. And it was a place for me to dump information.
That's awesome.
For me to eventually look at it later or use it later. Yeah, just to drop information and share it, right? But it was really inspired by this one of the first and pioneer in the social movement in Mexico, Afro-Mexico, Africa, which translates into, it's an abbreviation, Africa, Asociación para el Fortalecimiento de los Derechos y los Pueblos Indígenas y Afrodescendientes, And they're in this town in Jose Maria Morelos, and the director of this organization at the time, and now nonprofit, Israel Reyes Larrea, had a blog called Afri Colectivo Blogspot on like Hotmail, one of those, like before what we have now, right? Yeah. So it was one of these random Blogspot blogs that he created, where he was literally writing like news reports, or sometimes copy and like scanning and then posting the local newspaper on this blog. There was no other way to get access to this information. So I remember coming across that blog and finding like a gold mine of information. He was brilliant. He had a radio show called Radio Cimarrón. Actually, he comes out in Black and Latin America.
Yes, that sounds familiar.
I went there. I was at his house. I stayed with him, but of course I met him way before all of that happened.
Okay.
So he comes out there in that film, and then I met his wife. So Israel, he's like mestizo, but he considers himself an Afro-Mexicano. And I remember challenging him about that, because I was still exploring like the appropriation, or when can you call yourself Afro-Mexicano? So that was a great conversation to have with him. But his wife is Angustias. She's black, like 4th-generation black from Costa Chica. Like she can trace it all the way to like 300 years ago. And I got to meet her grandmother, and I got to visit his cultural center. But anyhow, before we met, like they were posting a bunch of blogs about stuff that was happening, cultural traditions, school curriculums. I mean, the content was so rich, and they were a powerhouse, right? But them too, and then their family and siblings and friends, they were documenting, they were taking pictures, interviewing families, interviewing musicians. I mean, documenting famous painters and muralists in these communities. They were really capturing all the cultural projects that were happening in Costa Chica. They were the main source. And hence why they were so connected with the movement, because they were there when Father Glenn called the first meeting, the primer encuentro de los pueblos negros, the first encounter of Black communities in Mexico. And he was there since. But he was the only one putting stuff out there, transcribing and adding content. And even the first photo of AFROMEXICO in 2007, he filmed it. And he put the YouTube video embedded in that blog. And that was just like, to this day, I'm like, that what he did there was monumental, because it really allowed me to, one, get a glimpse of what was happening, have valid sources to start writing a proposal for grad school. Because I was just doing it so much on the side. I wasn't even thinking about grad school, but then I was like, why am I spending all these times reading these books and reading all of this, and people don't know about it? I need to figure out how to, like, first organize my ideas. Yeah. So anyhow, the Facebook group AFROMEXICO was a way that I could share content that I was coming across, you know. And in academia, there's a lot of this, like, I have a content, you don't have it, you don't want nobody to share, nobody will know. But I was inspired by the importance of raising awareness through making it visible online. You know, that was my goal. And in fact, I contacted Israel and I said, hey, I created this group. It's already about 1,000 people. I just created it inspired by your work. And I wanted to toss him the keys. I'm like, here's the admin access. You can do whatever you want with it. And he's like, no. I don't want that. Like, that's you. You run that. Like, thank you for doing that. Please help us keep the word, you know, and share everything you can, as much as you can. That's the goal and that's the hope. And honestly, it's been its own thing. Like, that thing lives. There's probably like 2,000 people I haven't accepted, you know, because there's all these people just posting random crazy things, and I constantly have to go there.
I know, I have the same problem.
Delete, cancel, eliminate, block, and, you know, the platform is there really to have people, one, raise their awareness on the Afro-Mexicano population, understand the social movement. And that's one key thing that I kind of emphasize, that I want people to share, or I want to make sure it's focused on the movement. There is a social movement happening. There's a movement, and it's about reclaiming Blackness. And also recently, and it's something that I wrote about, changing the Constitution, and that includes now and recognizes Black as being at the center of the making of Mexican history, right? So in Article 2 of the Constitution, now Blackness they have their own abiding laws, right? And they have their own rights, human rights, that they didn't have before. They have their own ethnic rights that they can now, that there's a process now that they can file claims under their rights for constitutional reform. And by that I mean getting cut of that pie for investments and economic development, you know, in these communities. Like, the indigenous communities of Mexico get around, last time I checked, were like $1.5 million which is nothing, allocated for Afro-Indigenous resources of all sorts, right? Yeah. From cultural events, festivities, whatever you want to call it, around the country. So that disseminates and creates and raises the awareness on the indigenous groups and struggles and whatnot, and promotes culture. And the Jewish community, they have their own census, and they've had it for forever. They have their own resources. But the Black communities never have that. Have never to this day have seen a dime from the Mexican government being sent specifically for this type of investment. Like, the state of Oaxaca was the first one to set the tone. They're the first state to reform their own constitution, state constitution, to include Black folks. But they added them like copy and paste under all the indigenous laws, right, that exist, all the articles or reforms, right? So it wasn't much. There was really nothing, but at least they did it at a state platform level. And then other municipalities in the state of Oaxaca started adopting that. But again, it was just all in word and writing, but no structural reform. Recently, the structural reform just happened in 2020, and that's kind of what I was documenting. I wanted to make sure that people would be able to know how this movement got started. What did it take for it to create structural reform and a revolution within Mexican government, and obtain national recognition. And it was part of this whole Black is Beautiful movement and the reconstruction of Blackness. And that's sort of what I documented, right? So this group has been a place for me to share a lot of this content that I to this day I come across. Sometimes just by my feed, because I'm friends on Facebook, right, with all these scholars, and there's a lot of folks now who've done PhDs based on the content. They've done masters, and they thank me. They send me messages. Hey, Jorge, if it wasn't for this group, I wouldn't have known about this topic. Thank you for sharing all those resources. And I mean, I always did, even when I was doing my masters, because I mean, there was so much content. You can focus on just the food. You can focus on the language, on gender issues, gender roles. You can focus on like 15th century, like historical archives of the first Black Africans that arrived to Mexico, and then the connection with Africa. And then, you have Vicente Guerrero. You can focus on the independence movement. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So for me, it was like, do whatever you can with this content. Plus, it was also a promise, and I think this is very important for me to say. I had promised Father Glenn that I wouldn't just write an article like most undergrad students would and never do anything about it again. Okay. I promised him. He made me make this promise to him, to be an advocate, and be a satellite of information in the United States to disseminate this information. So for me, when you asked me to come and talk to you, I'm like, that's my mission. I had agreed to this, so I never say no to that. I never, ask for money to doing interviews and none of that. If anything, I point to them to the right direction to figure out ways of supporting, these communities, or at least raising your awareness and then bringing that to your community.
That is awesome.
Negative, or just like your common denominator, like you said, start working at a good job at a cell phone store or a clothing store. And I saw that too often. It was too common. It was just like, oh, that's very typical. I wanted something different. And I've always sort of been like that. I've always wanted to try things different, do things differently. And it just came naturally to me. But little did I know that, going to undergrad would change my personality. I didn't know it would come with that. I didn't know it was going to change me completely and challenge me in so many different ways, subliminal ways. And I never came back the same. I'll tell you that. I came back from college and I wasn't the same person anymore. Like a lot of the same family values and all that, that stayed the same, but my identity changed. The way I see the world changed. The way that I carry myself changed. The friends that I make changed.
Yeah.
This was great. I enjoy listening to George speak because as a lifelong learner and a teacher, I just want to get a notepad and start taking notes. And I actually did. He learned so much about his identity that it made him an advocate for change, an advocate of the realization that discovering where your roots come from frees you in so many ways. Hey listeners, if any of you out there feel a little ashamed of where you came from, where your mom, your dad, your grandparents are from, please don't be. This is the beautiful jewel inside of you that makes you who you are. The diversity of the different areas of the world where you came from formed you who you are today. Hiding from this is not good. Embrace it. And keep searching to find where you came from. The more I dig into where my ancestors' footprints were, the more I want to find out about this identity that I call Jennifer Garilin Saldaña White. It's an adventure, your adventure, so go find out. Thanks again for joining me today. Please find me on social media as Afro-Latina Teacher on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I would love to hear from you, so write to me and let me know if you're listening. Go forth, love your culture, where you came from, and where you are going, because your footprint is one of a kind. Besos de Alabama. Hola, listeners. Are you looking for an incredible way to make a positive impact in the lives of young students? Well, we've got an amazing opportunity for you. Introducing Harvest International School, a beacon of hope for 300 students in Nairobi, Kenya, led by passionate educators Reynaldo and myself. This school has transformed the lives of these young minds, providing them with education, support, and a brighter future. Imagine this: 300 kids who were once victims of life on the streets of Nairobi are attending the school thanks to the unwavering dedication of 15 teachers and one director at Harvest International School. But the journey doesn't stop there. We need your help to continue this incredible work. With a monthly goal of $1,500, your support can ensure that these students receive the education they deserve and create opportunities they never thought possible. No donation is too small, whether it's weekly, monthly, or even yearly. Every contribution matters. By becoming a member or a partner of Harvest International School, you'll receive in your email a monthly newsletter filled with heartwarming photos and inspiring videos of the students showcasing the impact of your generosity. And the best part, your donation is tax deductible. Harvest International School relies entirely on supporters like you. Your contributions go directly to Bilingual Kids Incorporated, a 501c3 organization, ensuring that 100% of the funds are directed towards the school's teachers and operational costs. Join us in this journey of empowerment and transformation. Let's make education a reality for these young minds. Together, we can create lasting change and bright futures for these students in Nairobi, Kenya. Don't wait any longer. Become a partner of Harvest International School today. Donate by Cash App, Bilingual Kids, or by mail. 8 Masada Mountain Drive, Anniston, Alabama, 36206. Or you can find this information in the comments or the description. Please include your name, phone number, and your email so we can send you the monthly newsletter. The power to change lives is in your hands. Let's build a better tomorrow, one student at a time. Thank you for your generosity and for being part of something truly extraordinary. Together, we can light up the path to education and success.